You're listening to Feathers, a podcast of stories of women walking in faith. I hope these stories inspire you and encourage you to take flight in your own faith. I'm your host, Amy Bennett, and this is Season 9, Episode 7. Feathers is an outreach of Abiding Ministries. Find more encouragement at abidingministries.net. Hey friend, and welcome to Feathers Today. I am so excited to share my guest with you today. Sarah Beth Marr danced professionally as a ballerina for over 15 years in the Austin, Texas area. During that time, she began blogging as a way to share her devotionals for dancers, and it has since evolved into her book, Dreaming with God, a bold call to step out and follow God's lead, that came out early 2018. And I'll just be honest and say I have zero background in dancing. I never took it growing up, and even though I have two girls, they took a few classes, but they never really got into it like some of their friends. So the whole world of dancing is pretty foreign to me. But I read Sarah's book, and she relates so much of what she learned in dancing to her spiritual journey, and I was just fascinated. I was able to look at spiritual truths in a different way because it was presented to me with a different lens I had never really put on. And I just loved our conversation about her journey, and I cannot wait to share it with you. Before we get to that, I want to take a minute to thank our exclusive sponsor for this season, Dayspring Cards. If you have been following along with the episodes this season, you know that we have been sharing about the new Encourage Women's Devotional Bible. Well, I am so excited to share that it is officially released as of October 1st, 2018. I got my copy in the mail this week, and it was so exciting to see my two devotionals in there, but also how it all came together with all the other devotionals and the reading plans and the beautiful graphics that they did. This has quite literally been years in the making. And actually, I will be having the editor of the Bible on the podcast in a few weeks, my friend Denise Hughes, who can tell us more about it. But if you are needing a new devotional or Bible, or even if you want to give some of your people a Bible for Christmas this year, you can head over to encouragebible.com and link to the retailers, or it's also available in your local Lifeway stores on the shelves. And I'm sure if you have an independent Christian bookstore, you can check it out there too. All right, guys, with that, let's go ahead and get to my conversation with Sarah Beth Marr. Well, hey, Sarah Beth, and welcome to Feathers Today.
Thank you so much for having me, Amy. I'm so excited.
Yes, I am so excited to have you today. How about we start off and you can introduce yourself and all your people?
Sure. Yes. Okay. So, yes, I'm Sarah Beth Marr. I am married to my high school sweetheart. We live in Texas. We live in Dallas, Texas. We have three sons. They are ages 8, 9, and 12. So I guess the kind of different thing about me really is that I danced professionally as a ballerina, kind of before kids and also while I was having those babies. And I did that before becoming a writer. But yeah, we love Texas. We are born and raised there. And yeah, that's kind of a little bit about me.
Yes. And you have a book out.
Yes.
Dreaming with God, a bold call to step out and follow God's lead, which is absolutely perfect for this podcast.
Oh, thank you so much.
What I was telling you, I think it's just so cool. You actually have written this from the perspective really of being a ballerina. And I just think it's such just a unique perspective, something that you can bring to the table that a lot of people can't.
Oh, thank you so much. It's funny because actually, when I was dancing professionally so long ago, when I began my dancing career, I was just 18 years old, and I was actually looking for some type of book or devotional book that connected my faith with my dancing life. I would actually scour bookshelves in bookstores when I was living in Austin. I was at Lifeway and Barnes and Noble and things looking for this type of book. The internet was very new to me back then. That was over about 20 years ago. So, but as as that grew, I even Googled devotionals for dancers. I couldn't find anything. So I was actually looking for this type of book years and years ago. So that's really where the seeds were planted. I really wanted something that would help me kind of grapple with some of these issues I was facing in the dance world. But I also realized they're kind of everyday woman issues. They're just all the things we deal with. And I was just really looking for that. So that, anyways, that's kind of the beginning seeds of Dreaming with God.
Yeah, that is so cool. So I think you had started writing on your blog, right?
Yes.
And then it
yes.
kind of transformed. That's so cool.
Yes. I started the blog just about, it's been about 5.5 years ago. So, and that was such a scary thing to do. I remember sitting there thinking, I kind of felt this restlessness in my heart, like, is this something God wants me to do? Or is this something I'm just kind of thinking up on my own and just doing on my own? But I remember actually my mom, I think I actually might mention this in the book. I was kind of telling her about this. I had this idea. I think I want to put these devotionals kind of in a blog format but I'm not sure, And she actually said, what if that restlessness you feel that you think is such a negative thing, that you think is bad, what if that is the Holy Spirit kind of nudging your heart to step out and to do this thing and to try it? And that really flipped my perspective. And I will never forget, it was Valentine's Day. I typed out my first devotional, specifically for dancers at that time. Now they're for a much kind of varied, audience, but it was very specific to dancers. I wrote that devotional. I hit publish. I had no readers, but it made me so giddy, excited. It was almost just like something clicked in my soul. And I actually went to lunch with my husband that day, and I told him, I think I started a blog, and I just felt so silly and giddy, but he was like, cheering me on. That yes, that was kind of the beginning of the blog. So.
Well, that is just so cool. Like I said, I don't know. I'm a blogger at heart. I've been blogging since 2002. So
yes.
I just love to hear these stories, how it starts and, how it grows. And, I know a lot of bloggers, their dream is to write a book. And so that's really cool. But I would love for you, and I want to talk more about, I love that you talked about the restlessness and dreaming and all that. Definitely want to hear that, because that's really the center, obviously, of your book. But I really would love for you to share your story of becoming a dancer.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. You're going to have to school me on all kind of things, because I was never a dancer. I tried out. I didn't even make it to cheerleading tryouts, which I know they're not the same. Like I would kick my leg in the air, and like something in my neck would pop. It was like,
I love it.
I was just not, I'm made to be behind a keyboard. Let me just say that.
That's perfect.
But none of my girls were ever interested in any kind of dance. Actually, they're teenagers now. They give me a hard time. They're like, why didn't you force us to be in dance? And I'm like, well, you just weren't interested. So
yeah.
I think they wanted to, but they didn't want to perform.
Right.
They didn't want to be on stage. So anyway, dancing is just, for whatever reason, not in our family's genes. Anyway, so although I will have to say, my second daughter is really big into theater and,
awesome.
Acting. And so it's kind of like we're getting a little hint into the art world and like what that might look like professionally and stuff like that. But
yes.
Anyway, all that said, I'm so intrigued by your journey. And for you, I think that actually did start when you were younger. Right,
exactly. I shared this a little bit in the book, but I actually, my very first dream of my heart was to become an Olympic gymnast. That's what I really wanted to do. But I quickly realized that lots of things, I wasn't brave enough for it. It took a lot more hard work than I felt up for, really. It was scarier than I thought anyways. And I also got really tall. So that dream definitely kind of dissolved. But in the meantime, when I was about 9 years old, my mom took me to ballet, and I started taking ballet classes. I it wasn't love at first sight, but I kind of grew to love it. I realized it was a good fit for me. And what I really fell in love with, though, over time was the performing side of it. So playing a role in a ballet. We did this one ballet called Graduation Ball, and we just got to act and act and act and just totally, play someone different on stage. But at the very same time, I realized that I could just so fully be myself in the same way. I could just have so much fun performing. And I just grew in love with just bringing a story to an audience. And so after we would do the Nutcracker and all these different story ballets, Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty, and I just fell in love. Of course, the rehearsal hours, the ballet classes themselves were rigorous and difficult, but if I could just always think towards the performance, that it all kind of gelled together and became something, that was what I always looked so forward to. And so I kept at it. But I did not know all those years that I was training as a young ballet student. For some reason, I don't know, I'm not sure why, I did not really put it together that a gal could do this for a living. So yeah. I didn't really put that together until my junior year in high school. I went with a friend to watch a performance of the Nutcracker, and there were two artists there, a ballet dancer and then her male partner, that came from American Ballet Theater in New York City. And it was like, for the first time, I put together that, wait a second, this is what they do for their job. They get paid to do this. They are dancing that is their full-time job. And it was like, when I kind of put the pieces together, and again, I don't know why, it just, especially maybe in Texas, I think if I was living in New York City around all these other dancers and things, maybe I would have seen that at a younger age, but it's just not a real common thing here in where I am in Texas.
Yeah, and how many people, it's a rare too, though,
It is. It absolutely is. It's not something you do not run into professional ballerinas a lot. And so anyways, it just all clicked, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's what I want to do. That's who I want to be. And so that was where my journey started, with that desire. And then when I graduated high school, it was kind of this, we had to figure it out. It was like a puzzle a little bit of going, okay, my options are to go to college and study dance, which is one route, and dance professionally later. But for ballet, it's similar to some professional sports. A lot of dancers, most dancers, I would say a lot, don't go to college. They go straight into professional ballet. And so I went straight into the professional world, which was I had to do lots of auditioning. I got rejected several times. I had to work my way into the company. I mean, I couldn't just sign up to be a ballerina. It definitely
Is it kind of like not being drafted, but like you have to be picked, right? I mean,
yes.
Like any job, you have to interview and
definitely. Definitely. There were loads of other dancers who had the same dream, and we all had to go through this audition process. And then you start at the very bottom. I started as an apprentice, and then I had to work my way up to the company. So it's kind of a long, rigorous process, but when I got to it and was able to dance for a living, it was so fun. And I never thought of it as really a job where it provided money, although it did. But it was definitely just more of a love. I just loved just getting to be in the studio all day and rehearsing and performing. So
tell me about those moments when you're still auditioning. I mean, it's the right words.
Yeah, that's perfect.
It's so funny. I was talking about my daughter. She's talking the opposite. So she talks all about auditioning, and she says sometimes she's supposed to be using the word interviewing. And she was like, did you audition for that?
Oh, how funny.
Anyway, but talk about that process when and I assume that at this time you're a believer and really, this feels like a calling as well. Is that true?
Oh, definitely. early in those kind of searching years where I was kind of going, is this what I want to do for a living? I definitely was praying about it. I know my parents were praying for me about it. I was only 17, 18 years old at the time. And so, scary. I'll tell you just real honestly, it because all of my girlfriends from high school, they were going off to college, they were joining sororities, they were, I felt like an oddball at times because I was going off to do something that nobody really understood, nobody really got. And so I often felt a little bit, I wouldn't say embarrassed, but just a little shy about what I was doing because it was so different from what the crowd was doing. It was just so abnormal. And so it took me a while to kind of become comfortable in my own skin and kind of owning the path God had for me, just because it looked so different from anybody else. And also I was really young, so I was trying to kind of learn how to deal with that. And I did over time, with the Lord's help, of course. So
it's so interesting. It's like you would think somebody that's kind of like chasing the dream, like I'm just thinking, okay, I don't know why I keep relating this to the NFL because it's like,
no, I love it. No, it is. I get it. Nope.
It's totally related. Somebody like goes off to the NFL, like they're like so happy, like
yes.
Let's skip college and just go straight to the professionals.
Yes.
It's so interesting.
Yeah, and I definitely was happy about it. It was just more of, I think looking back, I wish I wouldn't have worried what maybe people thought or anything like that, because I realize now, looking back, what a privilege it was and what a joy it was. But I did definitely get caught up in thinking, I look like an oddball, So.
Right. So tell me about those rejections. Like, what does that feel like when you do kind of do this brave thing, and then you're going through the process of not getting the job, basically?
Oh yeah.
How did that feel?
Being rejected as a ballet dancer was really difficult, as far as just how the rejections would make me feel. In the ballet world, they're very connected to our physical bodies and how we look and what we weigh and our dancing ability itself. So I learned that I learned to not take them so personally. I learned that there would be a place in the dance world for me, but that it would have to be a door God opened. But I also had to learn to disconnect the rejections from kind of a personal rejection. And I've even found that in the writing world, of course, just in trying to publish my book, when there was a rejection, and there still are, even after publishing a book, of course, there's still no's and things like that. And so I've had to learn to not take them personally, which is so hard. But I would say it was tougher for me in the ballet world because they were very related to how I looked or what I weighed, or maybe my dancing really wasn't good enough. And they'll tell me that, and so, but I haven't, so it was hard, but I see now that, rejection definitely makes us stronger, and it guides us to the path that God has for us.
I'm so curious about that. So because I haven't thought about it. So in the ballet world, like how intensely it's connected to your physical body, I would assume that's a struggle that a lot of ballerinas would have then.
Oh yeah. And that's one of the things that really, in a way, just caused me to be so dependent on the Lord. So I had known Jesus since I was really a little girl. But being off in the dance world and, living on my own for the first time away from my parents, kind of covering and shelter. And suddenly I went from dancing was kind of this happy place in junior high and high school. There was not a lot of focus on our size or our body, but in the professional world, there's just different standards. And so I suddenly felt pressure to be more thin, to be stronger at the same time as a dancer. And I did not know where to figure out how to do that. I started to feel like, that maybe I needed to be thinner or leaner or whatever it was, but I didn't really know where to turn. And I think that's one of the things I want to be for, kind of some of the younger generation of dancers specifically, or just young women who aren't sure where to turn when they feel that pressure to be thin or lean or whatever it is, because I was really looking for that and I didn't have that. And I think with a lot of perspective now as a mom, kind of looking back, I see that God can help us with this detail of life too. And so that's when I really turned to the Lord, and I would journal to him and talk through it with him. And because just in ballet, there's strict standards, because ballet is a visual art form. So the bodies have to be lean. But yeah, it was a daily struggle, and it took a lot of years of just leaning on the Lord, of battling it out in my mind. Really, it was just so mental. And, so I learned that if I had my mindset right on the Lord, and, understanding that he formed me and made me, but at the same time, I knew I had to work on my body in certain ways. But as long as I kept that perspective that he's in this with me, then I could have a healthy view of my body in relation to dancing. So if that makes sense.
Yes, it's always a mental game, isn't it?
Yes, for sure. Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. So you were dancing professionally. Does that mean that you travel, or did you stay in the same city?
So it's different for every ballet company. So there's ballet companies all over the country, all over the world. Some are traveling, like touring companies. Some are not. Some do both. So I was dancing for a company in Austin at the time called Ballet Austin. We only traveled just a few times a year, either within Texas. We did go to Washington, D.C. So I would say I was mostly not traveling, but we would do the occasional tour.
Okay. So how many years did you dance professionally?
I danced for about 17 years. So in the last, it was really about 10 years full time, just totally in full time, like a 9-to-5 job. And then the last, I'd say 5 or 6 years, I was also having my sweet babies during that time.
So tell us that journey, what it was like going through, because I know it was a little bit of letting go too.
Oh yeah. So, when I was pregnant with my first son, I really thought I'm going to stop dancing. I was only 26 though. But I just felt in my heart, I want to be home with this baby. And I just didn't know how it was going to work back then. I didn't have a lot of examples of women who were ballet dancers and moms having babies. It was a little bit more, rare, as a professional dancer to be able to have a baby and keep dancing. Now it's not rare at all. The industry is so supportive of that. And, but anyways, at the time, I really struggled with that decision, but, I thought I was going to kind of hang up my point shoes. And then after he was born, I stayed home with him for quite a bit. But then the directors of my company were just so gracious and inviting. And they just basically said, how can we make this work? And, so we juggled it. I had a lot of help from my mom and my mom-in-law. And I also took camp, my first son, to the ballet studio quite a bit, back and forth. So it definitely became a juggling thing. And then same thing happened with my second son. 3 years later, I said, I'm going to stop dancing. And I tried. and then, again, my directors were so sweet and welcoming, but I also noticed in my heart this tug of war starting to happen, where I loved dancing, and I loved that I had help with that, with the kids. I had family to help me, but my heart just felt, it was like, I realized that nobody really teaches you how to let go of maybe the thing that you felt like you're supposed to be doing, dancing in this instance. And I didn't really know how to let go of it. It made me sad to let go of it. And it wasn't something that I could just easily let go of. And so each baby honestly helped me let go. And so second baby, I danced more, but, my schedule wasn't as full. I kind of cut back. And then third baby, I danced again. But by then I just knew in my heart that I didn't know what I had no vision of this writing thing or speaking or encouraging other women in Jesus. That was not on my radar, but I felt inklings of wanting to do something related more to encouraging women in Jesus. I couldn't articulate what that was, but my heart for home just kind of overcame me. I just wanted to make sure I could, I wanted to make sure my home was my first priority. So it was a slow letting go. It took me about 5 years to really fully let go of it. And then, about 2.5 years ago was my last performance. And for a year, it was very, awkward. I had been dancing since I was 9 years old. So, especially around Christmas time when I'm usually performing, like 20 shows of the Nutcracker. I remember that first Christmas, I was kind of like, I don't know what to do with myself a little bit. But I also really enjoyed just being there with my boys and doing very simple things. So it was kind of I did have to grieve it. And finally, these last couple Christmases, I've been okay. It's been fine. But, I think about a lot of women, there's times where we have to let go of our dreams. We don't know if they're going to come back into our lives. But there is definitely a grieving that can go on when we let go of something. And that's okay, is what I've learned.
Yeah, I can imagine that the letting go is just as hard. Like, I mean, I'm just thinking needs just as much as courage to let go than it is to step into it.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yes, for sure. Because,
I just have to think you have to learn that God will provide for you, not just in the thing, but in the next thing, whatever that is. And especially when you don't have like what that next thing looks like. Oh yeah.
And I think for a lot of dancers or moms or whoever they are, we think if I let go of this, I'm not going to have anything, special or something not as good or as fun as that was. But I think that's where there's this sweet surprise that God always has plans for us, that in every season, it's not like there's this prime of life and then it's kind of downhill from there. I've learned that it only gets sweeter, and we can't see ahead. But there is this, sweetness and just trusting him with that. And I noticed it was like, I took years to let go of dancing, which I'm okay with. I think I needed that. I needed those years to kind of process. Sometimes I look back and think, gosh, girl, I wish you would have just kind of let it go and moved on. But I had to kind of really process it. But I realized this when I finally let go is when kind of these new buds of dreams for the next season began, which was writing. And so it was like when I did let go, that's kind of when I felt like God was kind of holding me through all that time. But when I let go, he was like, all righty, let's kind of start dreaming for the next thing. And I think that's what he'll do with your listeners is when sometimes we let go and let him walk us through that, and he will start budding new dreams in us. But he's always going to be budding new dreams in us. And that's what I love.
Well, I think what's hard is that we want the new dreams before we let go. So we, because we want to like, give me the new dreams so I have something to look forward to and I can let go. But I think he asked us for that faith to say, even when you can't see, when it's gray, I want you to jump anyway.
And I think that's a really sweet gift we can give to ourselves. That's really hard, is a season of kind of doing nothing in a way, like being okay with, letting go of whatever this dream is and just pressing pause for a little season, not really knowing what our plans are, not really knowing what it is, and just using that time to pray for his vision in our lives and to ask him to establish the work of our hands. I remember when I got all my kids to kindergarten. So when I was dancing professionally, and I thought about them going off to kindergarten, my dream was, I'm going to throw myself into coaching ballet dancers, or I'm going to start my own dance company. Like I had all these ideas and visions, but when the time came for my little one to go to kindergarten, that all didn't come into fruition. And instead I had this blank calendar, which sounds amazing. And I'm sure there's moms out there going, I would love a blank calendar, but I had this blank calendar, and that was really scary for me. I remember thinking, what am I going to do with this time and this season? But I think if we find ourselves in that spot, we can kind of flip our perspective and go, let this be a season of God giving us vision and God speaking his desires into our hearts, of just kind of being here and letting him move us. And so I think that's a hard pocket of time to find. But if you can, even if it's a day or an afternoon, I think that those are really vital to our dreaming journeys.
I love that you're jumping into this whole idea of dreaming. And so here's the rub, and what I loved about your book and really encouraged me to dream is that I think sometimes, me personally, I really kind of skirt around this idea of dreaming, because I'm like, I don't want to just do what I want to do, I want to do what God wants for me. And I'm almost scared to dream, because it's I'm scared I'm going to go for something that was just my idea.
Oh, I know.
So how do you wrestle with that? How do you know when it's just you coming up with something, and how would you encourage a woman to actually, go for the dreaming, and what way do you do that?
Oh, gosh, that's such a great question and such a real struggle. And for me, I've done that so many times, and kind of going, is this me? Is this a me idea, or is this a God idea? And yes, it takes discernment. But, I would say for that woman out there who's feeling that, kind of going, is this idea my idea or God's idea, whatever it is? I think about the thought. Yeah, I think about how sometimes we don't know if it's his idea or our idea until we step out and try it. Sometimes we don't know if it's his idea or idea if we say it out loud to someone we love. My husband is like, it's so funny. I feel like God really uses him to filter my dreams. I can say an idea, like when I mentioned this idea of maybe writing a book one day, years and years ago, Brian, he kind of lit up and said, you can totally do this. I know you can. This is a great idea. Other ideas I've brought to him that are, I think in my heart, in my head, they're a good idea. And then I'll say it out loud to Brian, and he's like, good. That's interesting. And he's just a great filter of practicality and kind of going, that's, not what he doesn't say, but I can tell he's kind of like, that's totally different from this writing thing. Are you sure about that? And he's a great filter. So finding someone you really love, and trust, and who knows you, can definitely kind of filter that for you. But I would say the greatest thing we can do towards dreaming with God, the dreams he has for us, is really just nurturing and cultivating our relationship with him, and just getting that one-on-one with him, and taking the time to write down our dreams, to say, God, this is this idea on my heart. What do you think about that? And then to not rush the answer. Don't jump into something too fast. Give it time to marinate. Sometimes we're really excited about an idea. It sounds awesome. And then we jump in, and then 2 weeks later, we're stressed out because we jumped into this thing and we created this thing. So I would say just really processing it with the Lord. Give it time and space to really grow, or to let him dissolve it if that's not his direction for you. But I think every idea is kind of like a street sign of clues that God uses to direct us to his plans for us. So while this idea may not be something that necessarily he wants us to dive into, it's something he could use to direct us to what he actually wants us to do. So I wish there was this step-by-step perfect formula to discern, is this a God idea or my idea? But I do know that his Spirit leads. And I do know that sometimes the ideas come at us so fast, and we just know this is from God. Sometimes we kind of know, but we're not sure. And sometimes we figure out this isn't something I'm supposed to do. But I just want to encourage those women out there, just actually express the idea to God. Don't just stuff it in your heart, because he will clarify it over time and write it out. And I think sometimes we're so afraid to say the dream out loud or to write it down, because maybe we feel selfish for dreaming in that way or whatever it is. But God wants us to dream. I tell the story in the book about watching my little 9-year-old boy start football practice. And for the first time, and that morning, he just lit up like there were fireworks in his heart. I mean, he was just doing drills in the hallway and just so excited and just in his heart. I could just tell he was coming alive. And I remember thinking that's what dreaming does for us, for a tired mama, for a dancer feeling too old for ballet, for a writer feeling like she's only seeing rejection. Dreaming makes us come alive, and it makes us really, really giddy. And it honestly just gives us joy. And I really believe that is just from God. And so I always want to encourage women to dream, even though life, stress, routine, motherhood, whatever it is, can give us this message that's like, you don't have time to dream. Who are you to dream? And I just think that's a lie from the enemy.
Wow, that was so good. And that really spoke to me. I think the real key there for me, there's a lot of good stuff there, but I think the key for me is being able to say it and then wait. Because because I think in the past I've just been the person, I have an idea, I'm going to do my 10 steps and get it done.
Yes.
And I'm just jumping into it. But I think that if I can say it and then wait and just kind of let it simmer and pray about it, and that then God and I can kind of work through. And then, bring in my husband or bring in, my mom is always a good sounding board for me. Like, bringing in the people to say, is this a good idea? What does that look like? And I think you're totally right. Like, sometimes they're just signposts to something else. I know for me particularly, I felt like God was calling me to speak. And I thought, I'm going to go stand on stages and speak. And it just hasn't turned out that way. And so I was pursuing that. But in the midst of it, kind of found myself doing this podcast and doing live videos on Facebook. And it's still speaking. It just wasn't the way I had it in my head.
Right.
But you figure it out kind of like on your way, on your journey as you step into it. So I thank you for that. I love that.
You're so welcome.
So that was one of the best things I love about your book is you really talk about, it's really more about the journey with Jesus as you dream than the actual dream. And this is where I want you to teach me a little bit about, dancing. So one of the things that you talked about in one of the chapters that I just loved was it's when there's a dance with another person. What is that called?
A pas de deux.
Okay, see, that's what I didn't know how to say. Pas de deux.
Pas de deux.
Pas de deux. Okay, so tell me more about that. And I just love the thing that you and how it relates to our relationship with God, and just like the silence of between a couple can be the most powerful part of a dance.
Yes. Okay, so a pas de deux is a dance between a male and a female dancer, and it's one of my favorite parts about ballet. And it takes hours and hours of rehearsal because you're working together. So if I was working by myself, it's almost easier in a way because nobody's dependent on me. I don't have to look and kind of watch out for somebody else. It's all on my own. But when you're dancing a pas de deux, there's just this beautiful synchronicity that has to happen. And it just takes being so familiar with that person's every movement and every breath. And I compare that in the book to our walk or our dance with God, that he wants to lead us in the dreams that he has for us. But it takes us really growing familiar with him, really growing in tune to his voice. It also takes letting him lead. So in a pas de deux, when I was rehearsing, oftentimes I wanted to take the lead because it just felt easier, and it just felt like it was just more my way, and that's how I wanted to do it, kind of thing. But in ballet, in a pas de deux, the male dancer has to take the lead. He has to be in control, and he keeps the dancer just right on her balance, on her point shoe. He keeps her from falling. He lifts her up high to the sky, all these different things. So he has to be in the lead. And so the female's role is to really let go and let him lead as hard as it is. And it's the same way in our dreaming journey with God. When we actually kind of let go of the reins of our life and let him lead, our lives, I believe, grow into this just beautiful synchronicity with his plans for us. But yes, as you mentioned, I talk about kind of these quiet pauses in a pas de deux. And so in a big ballet, in a pas de deux, there's moments on stage where they're very small moments. Instead of doing they'll do these big tricks and turns and pirouettes and leaps and lifts and all these things. But sometimes the most beautiful parts of the pas de deux are just when they're just standing there looking into each other's eyes, or they're just kind of on hold. Can you hold on 1 second, Amy? I'm so sorry.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Can you move the car before we get on it?
Yes, I can. Okay. Edward, can I possibly give you my keys and let you? Okay. That would actually help me. I'm just on a phone call if you don't mind.
Sorry, this is, I forgot to
No, I meant to move. Amy, I am so sorry.
No problem at all.
I have a painter at my house, and he was like, could you move your car? I am so sorry. Do you want me to start on that section again, or how do you want me to?
No, just keep going where you were.
Okay. So there's these quiet pauses in the pas de deux, and for an audience member, those can just be so emotionally moving. There's just this stillness and quietness on stage. They're not doing these big fancy tricks. They're not in these even big fancy costumes with all these shining light brights. It's just quiet and still, and it's just so stunning. And so we compare that to our dancing, walking, dreaming journey with God, that those quiet moments in between the big dreams and the flashier moments that are great and beautiful, but all the in-between moments, with that time with the Lord, just processing where he wants to lead us, just getting to know him, just drawing close to him, those become our most beautiful moments in life. So that's kind of how I compare the pas de deux with our walk with God.
And I so agree with that. I mean, it's just moving. Think about it. It's just imagining somebody on stage and they're just imagining you, like for me, it's just in the floor of my closet with the Lord. And those are the stillness. Those are my favorite times with him too.
And I think too, like you said, being on the floor in your closet, those are also the most satisfying times. And I think that's what, a lot of us dreamers, we are looking for satisfaction. The fulfillment of the dream feels like it's going to satisfy us completely. And while I do think walking in God's purposes for us gives us a sense of fulfillment, it doesn't fully satisfy. Only he does.
That's a good word right there. It's so true. It's so true. Okay, so there's a couple more things that you have learned in dancing that have related to your faith, and I just think these are so fascinating because obviously I've never thought about them. Okay, so tell me about the plie.
Okay, so plie, basically the term means to bend. So you're bending your knees. It sounds so simplistic. But for a ballet dancer or a dancer of any kind, plie is, I think, the most important movement in her dancing. So plie allows us to, it gives us the power to leap. It gives us the power to jump. It gives us a centeredness to our dancing, because as you bend your legs, you are kind of getting grounding yourself deeper. Yeah, deeper. And so I love comparing that to our walk with God. So in order to live out his purpose for us, or to dance the dreams he's got for us, or whatever it is, we have to go deeper. It's like the deeper we go with him, just really, I think the sweeter our journey becomes, also the more impactful our journey becomes, whether we're impacting all these thousands of people, from a stage, or whether we're impacting our families, our neighbors, just people in everyday life. I believe the deeper we go, the more impactful. And in a practical sense, that's just spending time with him, being in his word, not in a legalistic way, not in a, I have to do my quiet time or read for a certain number of minutes time, but just nurturing that abiding relationship with him, just walking with him and going deeper is what allows us to take these big leaps of faith, in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Perfect wording there. Thank you.
I'm going to borrow that from you.
Yeah. Okay. So last one I'm going to have you talk about is a phrase that you use throughout the book, and I think it's a phrase that was used throughout your dance career, is that people would tell you to dance big.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Yes. Okay. So I am an introvert by heart, and so that easily bled over into my dancing in a negative way. So I often found myself dancing kind of inside this little safe little box. I didn't want to dance totally full out because I was afraid I would make a mistake. Dancing is very rigid, and our lines have to be so close to perfect, and we train and we study and we are coached and all these different things to be as close to perfect as we can. So I was always afraid I was going to mess up. And especially not so much when I was younger, when I kind of fell in love with dancing, I felt very free to dance big. But when I got to the professional world, I just felt like the pressure to be perfect was often more than I could handle. So I danced really small and safe. And I'm also a taller dancer. And so what happened was it's almost like my dancing wasn't proportionate to my height. And so I was just dancing really small. So I just would hear this correction over and over again from different teachers and artistic directors. Sarah, you need to break out of your box and you need to dance big. You want to dance as if you were dancing for the last person in the row, the last row at the back of the audience, because otherwise they're not going to see you. And also, I learned that dancing big, it's just more of this perspective of owning your dancing, and the audience loves it. The audience just, they are more drawn to it because the gal is dancing full out, unhindered by insecurities or feelings of failure or whatever it is. And I just found that in just real everyday life as women, we end up kind of living in a little box. Like we kind of close ourselves in. We don't want to be too, maybe too out there with our faith or too exuberant and giddy, which is kind of how we feel on the inside, but we don't really want to show that, or we lose our confidence, or we're kind of wrapped in insecurities, or we're worried about how we look, or we're, just how we compare, all these different things. And I taught ballet over the years, and sometimes I just want to grab a gal by her shoulders, a dancer, and just tell her, I see it in you. You have the gift of dancing. You are beautiful and stunning just as you are. Like, you don't have to try and dance like somebody else. And I just want to shake her, and because that girl was me, and I just want to shake her and say, be free to dance the way you dance, to live the way you live, to walk and talk and be the gal God made you to be, because she's so stunning. And that's what I want to say to listeners and to moms and to women is to dance big in a sense in their life. And that just means, knowing God is holding their hand, and knowing God has created specific purposes for them, knowing God has created them and formed them beautifully. Live in that way. Just live that out, own it in a way, and really own the beautiful path that He has put you on.
Oh man, those are such good words. Dance big. I think that's a great way to just summarize the whole thing. It's just like dance big, because I think it's like when you have that, when you're grounded in that relationship with God, and He's with you and He's directing you, and you're following all the signposts and all that, you can be confident in what you're doing because you're in God's will.
Definitely.
And I think that's for me, that has been the struggle all along the way. It's just, you're so scared. Like, am I doing what God wants me to do?
Yes.
And it's because I was skipping over the relationship,
Yes. Yes.
And so when you skip over the relationship, you don't know. You actually don't know.
Right. And if you think about it, his heart for you, he wants you to, dance big, dream live out the dreams he has for you. He wants to bring that out of you. He doesn't condemn you for that. And I think sometimes, like you said, like we kind of just want to live, I don't know. We just kind of want to live kind of so safe and we kind of always live in question. Am I on God's path for me? Am I not? And he doesn't want us to feel that way. He just wants us to, he wants us to keep it simple, focus on our relationship with him, and kind of all of the dancing and the dreaming will kind of come out of that. But it's so hard to remember in the moment,
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I can definitely relate that even with this podcast, like I always say, like every season I question, should I keep doing this? And like, it's just intense praying in between seasons. Should I do it? And I can confidently say, I'm supposed to be talking to you right now because
I love it.
I know he directed me to do this season. So it's like, I can be confident in it. In my schedule, that he's going to work it all out, that he'll bring the right guests. Like there can be a confidence in it when you've done the work with him ahead of time.
Right. And I think too, on that note, we often want to see the fruit of the dream God's planted in our heart, or the seed he's planted. We want to see it faster. So if we don't see these big results, or we don't see this big movement come from our little idea, sometimes we just get so discouraged. And I think too, nowadays, now that we can see, we can kind of tune into everybody's world through social media, which is so fun, but it also can be so disheartening because we can see the fruit of someone else's dream taking off a lot faster than our dream, all of that. And so I think just kind of remembering that, to be faithful, to cultivate faithfulness where God has planted us, believing he's put that dream on our heart, but trusting him even if we don't see the fruit, which is so hard, trusting him for the fruit that may come years down the road. So keep podcasting, Amy.
Yes.
I love your podcast.
I can't believe you brought that up. That was a good word for me, if nobody else, because it's so easy to look at other podcasts and go, oh man, we're just, so tiny. And,
I know.
But I just do always encourage myself.
Yes.
It's like, I'm doing what I'm meant to do, and God will bring the right listeners. And I always say too, it's like, who knows who is listening to this? I think I said that even in a recent conversation, like somebody could be listening to this in 30 years because of the internet.
Exactly.
And
yes.
Who knows?
And the other thing is, you and I, we like to create. A lot of dreamers, we like to create, and God is creator. He created us to want to create. And if we will keep in mind that the process of creating, let that be the reward. Let the joy we get from creating words or doing the podcast or writing or dancing or whatever it is, let that be the reward, instead of what I've fallen into so often is I let the result be the reward, and that maybe satisfies for a split second, or that result never comes. And so it's really discouraging. So really letting the praying over it, the talking to God about it, just the delight of creating with your creator, be the reward.
Man, that's so good. That's so good, because I always think too, if nothing else, my podcast has changed me.
Oh, I love that.
And
Yes.
built my faith. So if nobody else is
Love
listening,
that.
I get to talk to him hundreds of amazing women. So yeah,
That's
but
so
yes,
cool.
listener, we care about you.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, you have been prayed over. So I know this will impact them too. So
Yes.
man, I am just so thankful that we got to talk today. I've enjoyed it so much. So if people want to connect with you, get your book and all that, what's the best place for them to do that?
Sure. To connect with me, they can connect with me on my website, which is sarahbethmarr.com. And they can also find me on Instagram. Everything is Sarah Beth Marr. So Instagram, Sarah Beth Marr, Facebook, Twitter, Sarah Beth Marr. To get my book, you can grab it at any Barnes & Noble. It's in a book or ebook form, Barnes & Noble, Lifeway, or you can order it on Amazon or at Barnes & Noble, Lifeway, any of those places.
Yep. And I have a confession to make as we go. I've never seen the Nutcracker.
That is okay. Oh my gosh.
So
It's
listen,
okay.
I'm putting it on my list for this
Oh,
season.
good. Yes, yes. I think once you see a good one, and you'll fall in love. Like, it's just kind of so Christmassy and magical. So I hope you like it.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks again, Sarah Beth.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved it.
Well, friends, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Sarah Beth is just such a sweetheart, and I loved learning. Thank you for being patient in all of my ignorance in dancing, and I hope maybe if you don't have a dancing background, you learn a couple things too. I just thought it was just so beautiful. But a couple of the things that I really took from that is, one is just how important it is to realize that sometimes that we will take a different path than the people around us. So, she is on this unique dancing journey, but even this thing on the outside, you would be like, oh, I'm sure she's just so excited about it. Like, when you're in the middle of it, you just can feel so isolated and like different and lonely because it doesn't look like what everybody around you is doing. And so that can actually like strike some, vulnerability and maybe even some fear that maybe you're doing something wrong because, you're not doing what everybody else is doing. And so I just want to encourage you, if you are being called to something that is different, being called out that's different than, maybe your friends or your family have ever done. Maybe you're the first Christian in your family and it feels really weird to maybe lead a Bible study in your home or whatever it might be. I just want to encourage you that is a unique path that God has you on, and just to go in boldly and with courage, and to know if God is leading you, He will lead you through it. And even if you don't know what you're doing, because you haven't seen somebody else model that for you, that He will lead you and guide you. And I just look back on Sarah Beth's story and really her journey and just see how God was so faithful. She was able to do that professionally for 15 years and then even use that time past that to be able to share God's truth through that dancing lens. So the other thing that really stuck out to me is that struggle about dreaming with God. And is this His idea or is this my idea? And I know, as I talked about, that sometimes I'm scared to do things because I'm like, gosh, is this just my idea? Is this just me trying to forge my own path? And I just loved her idea first to, sometimes you have to try it out to see. And I think, if we're believers, we have the Holy Spirit, we'll see, right away. If we're doing something that just doesn't feel right and it's just not right, the Holy Spirit will convict us and say, this is not for you. But I love her other, suggestion too, is to try it, is to say it out loud. Say it out loud to somebody that you trust. And I think there's something that happens when you talk to somebody trusted and they can, confirm like, yes, I have seen this growing in you, or as I have started to step out and speak a little bit, whether it's my podcast or whether it's on my Facebook Live, or as I, began to write, my mother-in-law, she was like, oh, I knew that God was going to do something in your life with this, and she could see it coming. Well, she never told me this, like 20 years ago, 25 years ago when I met her. And so it was a big surprise, but at the same time, it was like just that confirmation, because I was saying some of these things out loud and beginning to see some of these things budding. And she was just really able to confirm the journey that she could see that God had me on, and I didn't even know it. So if you have a dream and you're not really sure if it's His idea or your idea, find somebody that you can just share your dream with. Some people I have heard, we've talked about this with my friends, of having a whiteboard session, just bringing a couple friends together, get a whiteboard together and just really start, testing out your dreams and all the details. And do you think this would work or that would work? Do you think this would fit me? And you can have those sessions together. And it's just so cool to be able to do that with your friends and then watch it as it unfolds. So as I've talked about many times, let's get in community. Let's not do this on our own, and take these leaps of faith with other people. All right, guys, I appreciate you so much listening. Again, go pick up that Encourage Women's Devotional Bible if you have not gotten it yet. And also be sure to be following us over on Instagram and Facebook And you can do that at our account, Abiding Ministries. All right, guys, thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next week on Feathers.